Well, hello everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the biggest freewheeling live streaming poetry podcast on the planet. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest, Kim Addonizio, is here on the line. She'll be with us in about 10 minutes. But before we get into it, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notification. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. It always helps. Clicking those buttons tells the computers where to share poetry, and then more people read poetry, and then the world becomes a better place because we've all read poetry. And so how can you go wrong? And all you have to do is click like and share and tell your friends to watch and whatever you can do. All right, and now as we always do, we're going to start out with our Poets Respond poems. And we have two poets this week. It was one of those huge weeks where we had over 300, almost 350 submissions, I think, for Poets Respond. And we picked two poems that seemed appropriate for the week. And first, let's start with Alison Luterman, who just popped in. And it's great to see you, Alison. How you doing?
Fine. I'm well, thanks.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you. We had that wonderful poem of yours that was so profound the day before the election that went viral and was spread all over the place. And in a way that this poem is sort of a follow-up to that. It's in sort of maybe in conversation. Do you want to tell us how this poem came to be, how we started it?
Well, I mean, all my friends and I are all kind of freaking out. This first week of the new administration has been heartbreaking, and we knew it would be bad, and it's bad, and we're all in a state about it. And I just, I've read, like probably all of you, a ton of pundits and op-eds and all the wise people, and I just needed a poem for this moment because it's the feelings, not just all the facts of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And you do such a great job of turning those political feelings into poetry. Like better, there are a whole bunch of poems that you've published in Poets Respond that work really well to turn those emotions into poetry in a way that's really hard for people to do. How do you go about like taking that? You have a perspective and then turning that into something that's more than just sharing that perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's not an op-ed, I
Yeah,
don't,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
not writing an op-ed. I want to write a poem. It's hard, honestly. A lot of false, dead ends and trying different approaches until I find the one that works. I started out this poem trying to talk about my grandparents. My great-grandparents were immigrants. My grandparents really believed in this country. They really were very idealistic about it because of all the opportunity that, all that stuff. It was another time. It was another era. And so I was raised with this kind of belief that America was a great place. And I know I've known for a long time that that was a myth, but anyway, I started trying to do it from a personal level, but the poem really wanted to be written from a much bigger perspective than just my own personal family history. And so I let the poem lead.
Yeah. Well, I just love the way you let a poem lead. Why don't you go ahead and read it? Praise the broken promise of America. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Praise the broken promise of America. Praise deep mineral veins under rich dirt and fossilized remains of dinosaurs turning themselves into gas for our benefit. Praise the exhausted earth, miles and miles of subsidized corn and cattle lowing from their hellholes in automated milking barns. Praise farm workers rising before dawn, their sore backs and aching knees. Praise the myths that drew them here, stories eagerly consumed when there is nothing to eat but faith. Praise the courage of the reverend to look the dragon in the eye and preach mercy. Praise whatever hidden waterways are still pristine. Praise music that refused to play at the funeral of democracy and the killing cold that swept through Washington when the fake Pope took power. Praise drag queens and lipstick lesbians, boys who are girls and girls who are lions, butch women wearing tool belts, and all the musical theater nerds who are even now building new passageways, mapping the next underground railroad, and suiting up to be conductors. Oh, everybody, get on board. This train will chug quietly across the Great Plains and over rocky Sierras into the desert where people still leave bottles of water and packets of food for the desperate, who have always been the lifeblood of this nation. It will stop in obscure hamlets to pick up fugitives with tears tattooed on their cheeks and fraying backpacks overspilling with contraband books. Praise the weirdos, because if anyone can save us, it will be us. And praise all the glittering illusions we gawked at, ignoring our own neighbors in favor of a 24-hour peep show on the internet. Praise the convict firefighters on the front lines in LA, battling the insurmountable for $10 a day. We gambled our future for a hot air balloon with a hole in it. Praise our reckless hubris and the infinite distractions of the hall of mirrors we find ourselves in now, and bless our overwhelmed brains, scurrying like mice for shelter. Bless our collective rage and protect the officers who stood up on January 6th and now see their attackers roaming the streets like rabid dogs. Bless the animals we have always been in our coats and shoes and clumsy language. Bless our willful ignorance, so enormous, so world-altering that, like the Great Wall of China, it can be seen from outer space, where the gods are shaking their heads even now in pity and in awe.
Yeah, it's that move to the gods shaking their heads in pity and awe that made that poem really work, writing to that point. So thanks so much for sharing that, Alison. A wonderful poem, as always.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. It was Alison Luterman with today's poem of the day, Praise the Broken Promise of America. And now we have a bonus poem, too. When we get a lot of submissions, as tends to happen, you get a lot of good poems. And we had room on a Tuesday, so thought we'd add a bonus one. And we have Paul Jones here, a first-time contributor to Rattle, with a villanelle about vultures. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. I hope you are.
Yeah, I definitely am. It's great to see you. And the fascinating thing about this poem is I read it sometimes when I'm reading poetry response submissions. I read the note first to see what the poem's about, and sometimes I just read the poem. And it tends to be these weeks where there's just so many political news poems that it's almost like what the poem's going to be about. And I assumed this poem was a metaphor for the political scene right now. And then I clicked on the article, and it turns out it's a literal story about the vultures in Hillsborough, North Carolina. So tell us about this poem and how this one came to be.
Well, vultures are on your mind when you're also dealing with the problems that Alison just talked about. But through serendipity or through a micro vision of what's going on, there's a problem in Hillsborough, North Carolina, in that some neighbors have been feeding the vultures and luring them into their neighborhood by feeding them. And vultures they have a magnitude of impact greater than, say, wrens. So this has divided the town up between people who think vultures are just as good as a cardinal and people who think anything that poops that big should not be encouraged to be around. There's a lot more to the behavior of vultures, of course, in that you put people off and make them love them a little bit less. Mm-hmm. And probably we should.
Yeah. And so you started writing about this. Did you know it was going to be a villanelle right away?
Well, this is like Alison, let the lines follow me. So mm-hmm. I had the first and third lines. And I went, these are pretty good lines. Let's see if this will turn out to be a villanelle or turn out to be something like a rondeau. I realized early on it needed to be about obsession. And the beauty of a villanelle, from beyond, the snows of yesterday to Rothko, I Wake to Sleep, or to The Art of Losing, or to Dylan Thomas. They're all about obsession. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's what the French had in mind before Francois Villon, but when it came into English and when it came to America in particular, this idea of obsessive repetition comes in. It kind of takes over in the 20th century, because in the late 19th, there was a whole obsession with these French forms. Yeah. And now we're left with sort of the ashes of them to build them up into something new, something American, something where the syntax does something different, something where the lines cheat in different ways. And that struck me as these birds coming over and over, and the impact they had on the people around them were perfect fodder.
The perfect form definitely for this subject matter, and the extended metaphor maybe that's there. Why don't you go ahead and read it, Paul?
Vultures in Hillsborough, North Carolina. When they come, they bring the fearful dark, like English majors looking for work. Feather-caped, bare-faced, and red or black. Now there is no empty tree. Stained barks one side, they leave. They show no respect when they come. They bring the fearful dark. They praise flesh with a twist of their necks, with their hiss from song-refusing beaks. Feather-caped, bare-faced, and red or black. Where they've been is easy to detect, bones realigned by their secret sect. When they come, they bring the fearful dark. They keep it hid, or so I suspect, deep in images that our minds connect, feather-caped, bare-faced, and red and black, to murder, suicide, car wrecks. They slip away like impatient clerks. They come back, bringing our winged fears, dark, feather-caped, bare-faced, and red and black.
Yeah, so it seems to be a lot of symbolism there in that poem too. Paul, thanks so much for sharing that. It was Vultures in Hillsborough, North Carolina by Paul Jones. It's great to have you on. Thanks for dropping in and sharing that poem.
My pleasure. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Kim.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so it was once again Paul Jones with Tuesday's Poem of the Day. If you are not signed up for the daily poem on Rattle.com, just go to Rattle.com, find the sign up thing. You'll get this poem in your inbox on Tuesday and another poem every single day of the year. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Kim Addonizio. So sit tight and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Kim Addonizio. Kim was featured with a tribute to her and her poetry students in issue 67 of Rattle, which is a wonderful issue. You want to check that out. She was also featured on Rattlecast number 88 if you want to go and look that too. Kim's the author of 9 poetry collections, 2 novels, 2 short story collections, and 2 books on writing poetry. The Poet's Companion, which she wrote with Dorianne Laux, and Ordinary Genius. Her new book is just out from Norton in the fall, and it's Exit Opera. And here she is, Kim Addonizio. Hey, Kim, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for coming back, and congratulations on this new book. I had some recommendations. People said, I read Exit Opera, and you have to have Kim back on the show because this book is just wonderful, and the way she talks about it is wonderful too. So I'm really excited to hear more, from the book and more of how the book came to be. Do you want to start out, though, reading the opening poem?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. This is it's a proem, so it's sort of before the rest of the book even, and this is the title poem, Exit Opera. And you don't really know anything except it references a Wagner opera. The shield maiden waits in the wings. The opera goers wait, shifting in their seats. Out in the forest, the ember waits in its cigarette to make its black mark on the world, not content to ravage a few rolled tobacco leaves. It wants to show it can murder more trees than the last bitter fire. In the sequoia grove, in record heat, tourists wait for a chance to stand inside an enormous burn-hollowed tree, while the bark waits the years it takes to grow over the scar. Legions of charred trees, legions of kids clambering over rocks. In the troposphere, the next giant pyrocumulonimbus cloud waits to be born from its gassy parents. Once the opera's begun, you must wait for what feels like eons for Brunhilde to deliver her aria as she throws herself on the funeral pyre and everyone goes up in flames. Once you escape a wildfire, leaving everything behind, a little void appears beneath your heart and lodges in your ribs. Again you must wait. If you see lightning, listen for the thunder to tell you how far or near you are. When Milton went blind, he felt useless, but then he decided it was okay to stand still, to abide. Look at the trees, who are patient, who suffer us to touch them.
Yeah, and that was Exit Opera, the title poem from Kim Addonizio's new book, Exit Opera. And so it is such a wonderful title, Kim. How did that overarching metaphor come to be? How did you know that was going to be the title and the way the book was going to be organized as a sort of opera for leaving?
Yeah, I didn't really know, but the book is sort of about on level endings, whether that's mortality or climate change kinds of endings, and on the other hand, about singing, about making art. And so singing against the dark times and Exit Opera sort of encompassed both those ideas for me. And I'm not a huge fan of opera. Um, I haven't been exposed to a lot of opera, so one of the tasks of this book to make it feel, but what I do know is that opera is very dramatic. You know, the operas I've seen, there's at least the Italian operas, they're very dramatic and lots of people die and lots of intense love affairs and betrayals and all of that. And so it felt like the right territory. And then because I had written this poem, which I could talk a little bit about where that comes from, but because I'd written this poem, I thought, well, I want to write a couple more opera poems so that it hangs together, so that I have other things in the book that call back to that idea of an opera, of just a performance in a way of something dramatic. So I think those are the sort of two poles that the poem kind of goes between, is singing and drama or dramatic events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned, how this poem came to be. What is it that you were about to say about that for the poem itself, Exit Opera?
Yeah, I was presenting a BBC radio show called California Burning, for BBC Radio. I can't remember, it was 3 or 4. It's one of those, and it's online somewhere. But I went there with my presenter, and we spent the night in a fire tower in the Sequoias. and talked to the fire rangers and talked to the people who spot fires and did a show about those wildfires. And so that was sort of where the material came from, was going up to the giant sequoias in Northern California. And of course, William Carlos Williams' idea that poetry is news that stays news. This is, of course, really present for us right now, especially here in California with all the fires in LA, down south. So, yeah, it's true. The news today is unfortunately going to continue to be the news. But on the brighter side of that, I think poetry brings us the news of the human and the
Hmm.
news of our consciousness, and that's also something that continues to be present, that I think poetry traffics in.
Yeah. Well, let's hear the next poem. My Opera is the next that you
Yeah,
had.
yeah, I decided to highlight a couple of the opera poems here. Um, so I thought, well, what would my opera be? And this is a 14 liner. There are a number of those in the book. My opera takes place in a dive bar. It's all drunken recitative. Okay, maybe an aria sung by a feral kitten, one by a skittish donkey, maybe one without words, just the sounds of lovemaking, moans, laughter, wailing. It ends with a dramatic flourish like smashing a glass in the fireplace. I always wanted to do that and watch the flames flare up. It's not a long opera, maybe fourscore years, give or take. Everyone gets their own glass and pours out whatever's in it onto the floor. The staging is difficult. Exploding stars are involved, high redshift galaxies, interior chambers, a little country blues, a little jazz guitar, a jam jar containing a tiny ocean and a tinier rowboat rocking gently in the swells that I am steering towards you in the dark.
Yeah, that is My Opera, and that sense of exit opera, of leaving, of this is the planet that we inherited when we were born, and this is the planet that we're leaving behind, and how we go about leaving is such a preoccupation with this in this book. Why do you think that is? Is there something that you were intentionally writing about in that direction, or are these the kind of poems that were just popping up as you were writing?
Well, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, it's a little bit of both. I tend to feel like I got the beginnings of a book when I get to sort of critical mass with a group of poems. Like I maybe have, you know, 20, 25 pages of poetry, and I feel like, okay, something's starting to happen here. I mean, there's things in that that will be discarded, but there are other things that are working. And so then I start to sort of think about themes and think about what I've got so far. And from that point, it becomes not only just writing poems, but also having that in my head somewhere, even if it's in the very back of my head, that I'm working on the next book. And so also thinking maybe a little more consciously about thematic considerations, but ultimately trusting that the book is going to be a snapshot of my concerns at a certain point in time, usually between like 2 to 5 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens in that time, it really becomes a portrait of whatever I'm obsessed with in that period of time.
Yeah.
Some of which turns out to be the same obsessions I've had my entire life and writing life. So,
Mm-hmm. Um, and so one of the things that people are always talking about in the chat windows are the great images in this poem and how they contrast and flip. Like you never know. There's always a strong concrete image, and then the next line there's something pushed up against it that might be very different, and there's a whole lot of movement through really strong images. And I was wondering as I was reading that how much of that is in the writing process itself of editing and revising and polishing down poems, and how much of that is just the way you think as you move through images. Would you say that you're driven in while writing these poems through visual imagery?
that's a great question. I don't really know. I, I mean, part of it is definitely trying to sort of hit the underground stream where the flow of language lives rather than my ordinary consciousness. So I'm trying to get to that place, and I'm usually aware of when I found it. You know, I'll write a lot of things and I'll know I'm just journaling, or I'm just writing garbage, or I'm just saying nada, nada, nada appears a lot in my kind of notes, like, oh, I can't get to anything, you know, and sometimes, and if I stay there long enough, I sort of seem to break through that barrier. Often it's a 2 day process where day one is having the whole day to work and getting really frustrated and feeling like I've wasted my day because I could have done so many things I needed to do. And I sat there beating my head against the wall of wanting a poem. But then I often find that if I can continue that into the next day, something kind of opens up, a channel opens in a way. So it's definitely partly the way my brain works, and they say that we remember a lot by images anyway. That's the way memory works, is that we remember through imagery. So it's partly about accessing that imagery, but it's also a partly thinking through what am I trying to say, which sometimes I'm very confused about. And so, but if I get a sense of my intent, which is something I stress a lot with my students, like once you figure out your intent, then you're really engineering things in the poem to support that intent and trying to go deeper with that. And so once I sort of recognize, okay, I've got something going here but this is too typical. I need something more surprising. I need to leap here. Um, or I need to say something here about X that I have an idea about, but the idea is very general, and you know, life is short, for example, might be one of the ideas, right? Well, I can't say that. I have to come up with something. So do I have a metaphor? Is it shorter than something? Can I use a simile or a metaphor? Is there another way to capture that nexus of thought? Life
Mhm.
is short. What's it doing in the poem? So you know, again, it's sort of a back and forth movement between the conscious and the unconscious mind, um, trying to be as free as possible, and typing a lot of things that never make it.
Mhm.
You know, just sitting there typing I'll type alternate lines for, like, you know, 10 pages for a single line, because even though and I know they're stupid even as I'm typing them, but I'm like, no, put this down, put this down, put this down, because you never know. And that tends to be my process.
Yeah, that's such an interesting phrase. I don't think I've ever heard anybody put it that way. Is finding my intent is what you said. And how far in the writing process do you find your intent? I think when I'm like workshopping poems and talking about it, you know, we'll get to the end of poems sometimes and say, you know, why did this poem want to be? You know, what is the purpose of this? And I think that's sort of what you're getting at. Is that there is to me, a poem has like an initiating, I don't know, like itch you're scratching. There's some kind of thing that's like driving you to put the pen on paper and write, and you're trying to discover what it is that you're trying to discover, I guess, as you're writing. Is that your process? And the thing is, how long does it take before you know, before you find your intent? Is that something that does take that whole day, or do you sort of know right away that this is where I'm going with the first few lines? You know, how do you find that intent?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's good to be too prescriptive at the beginning, because it can sort of shut down discovery, right? So you want to sort of be open and say, I don't really know where this is going, but yes, this little bit of language interests me, you know. And for this one, for example, for going back to Exit Opera, the idea of waiting, right? The shield maiden waits in the wings. And then and so part of my process for that kind of poem is that I know it's going to constellate, or I think it's going to maybe constellate around the idea of waiting. So I start to brainstorm, well, what else waits? What else do we wait for? What are the ways that we wait in life? And I'll have pages of, what do we wait for? What do we wait for? And, you know, and a lot of them will just go away once I find, you know, then I find the next line maybe, and that leads to something else. And then, so that's one kind of intent, is that I'm going to write about waiting, but I don't know that that's exactly the intent of that poem. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's something else that happens in that process. So I'm following some bit of language and just trying to constellate or juxtapose some things around the concept of waiting. And then other things start to happen and come in.
Mm-hmm.
And or even some ideas that I had, I think, well, Right. Like I've been, went on this thing about the fire tower and I had that experience and I had written down some lines about the kids, climbing over the trees and the different things and thought, well, what if I described that as waiting? So what
Hmm.
if I have the cigarette waiting to light something on fire? And I don't remember that that's the precise process for that image, but that idea is definitely something that can happen in the process of creating the piece.
Yeah, and when you find that intent, and you find what you wanted to connect with, I guess internally, like your with your subconscious, do you find that the poem, always ends up being a successful poem once you find the intent? Is it like you're writing, that first day where it's like you're deleting and erasing and moving and having, scrapbooking and notebooking and trying to figure out what you're writing about? Once you hit on like a thing, does the poem always have a place to go? Or are there poems that you find your intent but then still struggle with after that fact?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is so interesting. It's so squirrely,
Hmm.
The muse is so it's so random sometimes and I often feel like I have nothing to say or that I've written out what could I possibly have to say after a dozen books, that's left. Why don't I just, stop and kick back and practice my banjo, which I'm really into at the moment, and which a lot of times I'd rather do. Why? But that itch and that urge keeps happening, I want the place that being in the writing of a poem puts me. I want to be in that flow state and I want to be in that whether you call it a meditative state or whatever it is, that's my happy place, so I continue to want to write poems and so a lot of it is just trying to search for a subject or or dig into what might be triggering me or affecting me at any time. And so and sometimes, as I've gotten a little more comfortable in my life than I was as a younger writer, it's harder in a certain way. Um, but I still want the place that poetry takes me to. And so I try to just feed my imagination as much as possible with whatever that is, with television, with museums, with friendships, with all of the stuff of life. And my tendency is to sort of, I'm really an introvert, and so my tendency is to hide out from the world, which
Hmm.
on the one hand is good for a writer, and the other hand not so good if you want material, if you because things happen in the world, and when you go out and you do things with people and you interact, more things seem to happen for
Hmm.
me anyway. I mean, of course, Emily Dickinson puts the lie to that, and Flannery O'Connor said, you know everything you need to know by the time you're 5 years old to be a writer. So that's not true for everyone, but I find that that mix is sort of, staying in definitely helps me to focus um, and make the time to write, but also keeps me from being enough in the world to really have enough input and enough things flooding my brain and my experience that are going to lead me to something.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely interesting. Let's do another poem. Let's do Self Portrait as Goldfish next.
Yeah. Yeah, this one I don't remember how this one came about, but I ended up writing a I don't know, there are maybe three or four self-portraits in this book. Self-portrait as a goldfish trapped in a toilet. To be stuck at a reception with a man who fucked you once. Another opportunity to feel like a small freshwater fish. And remember those nights back in the Precambrian, before you'd evolved from a primitive life form that would gulp some whiskey at a party, and then float off in a stranger's car to a bed above a garage, and lie there spinelessly for the zeptoseconds it took him. Back then there was hardly any oxygen and no one was woke. Orgasms with men were a few billion years away. Orgasms, you had no idea how to get one. Men dining and dashing while you were still pulling out your chair. He's married now, he's got kids, good for him. Another opportunity for revenge fantasies. Shadowy wraiths drag him from the hotel ballroom, down through the gates of Dis, where there's no open bar. A fetal alien creature, long dormant in a cheese puff, slithers down his throat, bursts from his stomach, and races under a long white tablecloth. You could follow it and hide under there until everyone leaves. But he's the first to turn away, and it's just like before. He's done and moving away from you in record time. Time, what you wasted being even briefly attracted to people like him. You, flushed out to sea once more.
Yeah, and that was Self-Portraits of Goldfish Trapped in a Toilet. And some humor in that poem. And what's one of the things I was thinking about as I read your last book too and this book, it feels like, and I've been a fan of your work since The Philosopher's Club, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And I feel like there's more humor creeping into your work as the books go on, and sort of, where they were focused so much on intensity in the past, and now there's a lot more of that humor. Is that something that you're consciously think about as you write, or is that a development over time that you just naturally occurred to you, or what can you say about that?
Yeah, I hate to say again that it's sort of a little bit of both, but it is true, and I think, well, with dark subjects, Toni Morrison said you have to engineer moments of lightness, and humor is one way of engineering some lightness. Um, and I do think in some ways, in poetry at least, I've learned to take myself less seriously,
Hmm.
um, and hopefully in life too. Because it's just very helpful as a coping strategy to get through. And I think that the trick is, first, I grew up in a family that really valued humor. We sat around and laughed all the time. We had except for other things that were going on like violence in the family, but we had the same sense of humor. We all had the same way. We had the same things we found funny, and when we sat around, we joked a lot and had a lot of laughs. And and my mother was a very funny, witty person. And so I think I got that partly just from my family culture. And and then I think it just came into my work more because dark subjects just require more.
Hmm.
Um, and I took myself less seriously as I went along. I started out very earnest, and I find that some of my early work is very earnest in a way I don't quite identify with now. And that's,
Hmm.
I mean, that's, Philosophers Club was 30 years ago. So as your work changes as you change. And so as I've gotten older, and also, confronted more things around time and mortality, maybe I've felt the need and the urge more to lighten things up in some way in order to talk about those things and make them bearable and tolerable for myself and for people who might be reading the work.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because it's at the same time your work has gotten, I think, more concerned with broader issues. I think there was more of a personal life focus on in the early books, and having you talk about dark times. There's this sense that we have or tend to have that like everything is too serious now to be funny or to make light of it. And I think there's a lot of people, being chastised on social media and things for not being serious about things when these are serious times with serious issues. That the Poets Respond poet today that Alison read, a few people wrote back and said, God, this is bleak. and my response to that, I just thought, well, you should have read the other 300 poems. They're all, I mean, and so there's this way that we,
Yeah.
there's like a social pressure not to be humorous, even though, times require humor. Do you ever think about that, about talking about broader social issues, I guess? Do you ever have to wonder if humor is appropriate there, or is that something you just don't consider?
Well, the humor I admire most is dark humor and black humor and irony. So maybe that's the answer for me at least. Um, yeah, I I love people that think dark thoughts and make them funny for the rest of us. And my mother actually had quite a dark sense of humor, um, and would tell, the most, inappropriate off-color jokes, and delight in them. And so maybe again, that came from my family culture, and I also grew up in a household with a lot of violence, and I think that humor can be deflecting in a good way and a bad way, right? You can use it to sort of not acknowledge or look at things, but if you are trying to look at them, it can be a great tool
Hmm.
for helping you look at them.
Yeah, yeah, really well said. And so important for poetry to balance out, I mean, we have
Yeah.
to, yeah, we have to have light times that, be light at times so we don't get overwhelmed by the darkness, I guess you could say.
Well, yeah, and if you think about funerals, people laughing at funerals, why? Because we need it. When people remember someone who's died, one thing we do is sit around and tell stories about that person. And we often end up telling amusing stories about them because they are moments of lightness, and we need that.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear the next poem. This too shall pass.
Let's see. Yeah, and this is one actually when you asked me to think about some poems for today, I thought of this one again because um, it, what's been going on down south, where I know a lot of people, myself included, know some people who lost everything and lost their houses, and they're still very much struggling. And anyway, I thought about this poem. This too shall pass. Was no consolation to the woman whose husband was strung out on opioids. Gone to a better place, useless and suspect intel for the couple at their daughter's funeral, though there are better places to be than a freezing church in February, standing before a casket with a princess motif. Some moments can't be eased, and it's no good offering cliches like stale meat to a tiger with a taste for human suffering. When I hear the word miracle, I want to throw up on a platter of deviled eggs. Everything happens for a reason. More good tidings someone will try to trepan your skull to insert. When fire inhales your house, you don't care what the haiku says about seeing the rising moon. You want an avalanche to bury you. You want to lie down under a slab of snow, dumb as a jarred sideshow embryo. What a circus. The tents dismantled, the trains moving on, always moving, starting slow and gaining speed, taking you where you never wanted to go.
Yeah, that's another great poem. That was This Too Shall Pass from Kim Addonizio's new book, Exit Opera. I was going to say, if anybody has any questions, please leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass them along. And there's already a great question from Maro Dowdle, who asks, says, Kim does a wonderful job in balancing explicit exhibitionist narrative with gorgeous lyric. Any thoughts on how to achieve that? It's easy to veer into a sort of artless confessionalism. And that is such a great question. When we start to be really open and honest, we tend to lose that lyric beauty. And so how do you find the balance between the two?
Well, I've been tarred with the brush of artless confessionalism many times.
Oh, I don't know. Whoever said that doesn't know what they're talking about, I think.
But I've never, I mean, I've always just thought of it as the lyric I and the speaker in the poem, which actually frees me to say things that I might be too self-conscious to say otherwise. But I really do see the page as a sort of place that I step onto as a character in a way, who's myself and not myself. And she's sometimes funnier than I am in person. She's sometimes brattier, um, sometimes wiser, and I just let it go onto the page because I don't feel some. It sounds weird to say because sometimes it's very personal, or seems very personal. Sharon Olds talking about the apparently personal, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, I feel very free to just say what I want to the page. And then it goes out there somewhere, and I can't control that, and I can't control what people are going to think of it or think of me for writing it. And I just don't really care. I don't care anymore.
Uh-huh.
That's one of the beauties of getting older. You just start to go, well, fuck it. This is who I am. Some people are going to like it. Some people are going to hate it. People are going to have their own projections and their own thoughts about who this is or what that means. But my job is to just write the poems the best I can. And
Hmm.
and my commitment is to writing an interesting poem. And so if a line feels like it's going to be more interesting because I either reveal something intimate or create an intimate moment for the character that is me, I'm going to do that because I want that. And that's the art of it, I think, is to create the intimacy with the reader on the page. It's one thing that I got from poetry early on and loved and felt like there was a voice speaking to me from this page, and it was a voice that was vulnerable and honest.
Hmm.
Even if everything wasn't exactly true or autobiographical, which it's not in my work either. But people tend to think it is, people tend to think every word is true, and I could, take apart certain poems, and I have in Bukowski and a Sundress, which was the book of essays I wrote, the first book of essays. I've got another one I'm working on now, but one of the essays on there is it's called Pants on Fire, is in Liar Liar Pants on Fire, and I sort of take apart how I lie in various poems,
Hmm.
just to say it's not all true. It's a construction. It's a made thing. It's a poem.
Yeah. Do you have any trouble getting away from that self-conscious nature at all anymore? I mean, you say that you're sort of past that and fuck it, and that's a great place to be. But are you always there? And because I think the best book of writing or book on writing is Zen and the Art of Archery, because it talks so much about how your willful will gets in the way of, you think that what you do not do yourself does not happen. And there's that sense of being self-conscious that just ruins everything and ruins the sense of creativity. And I don't think you can make art if you're self-conscious. And I think that's the thing that so many artists struggle with, is to not like think, as Bukowski said on his tombstone, don't try. you know
Mhm.
like that trying is what gets in the way, and just letting it happen, letting the art flow through you is so central. Do you have any trouble getting rid of the self-consciousness, or any advice on how to get rid of the self-consciousness if you've overcome that completely?
Well, I mean, I'm often uncomfortably self-conscious in my life, so I haven't conquered it there, but I think I have pretty much conquered it in writing. But I guess the corollary to that also is be kind. You don't want to harm people with
Hmm.
your work, but you also have to acknowledge that you may anyway. And you have to be okay with that. You have to realize that people are responsible for their own responses, and your aim is not to be intentionally unkind.
Hmm.
So I have worried about in the past in relation to family, say, mostly my mother while she was alive, and then my daughter, who still, and I just was actually with a young woman who was sort of my other daughter, who I raised for a number of years, and I just saw her and her kids were sort of my honorary grandkids. And she said, yeah, I was reading Bukowski in a Sundress, and she said, and then I got to this one chapter and I just put it down because I didn't want to remember you that way. you know so she was really struggling with that, and I thought, well, I don't know what to say about that. I can't take it back. I'm not interested in taking it back and rewriting it. It's what I put down. And so, what you put down, people may judge you for it. And that's a part of it that I think is the hardest part to overcome and
Hmm.
the most important part to overcome. And if you look at your life, people judge you all the time. They judge you on the first impression on seeing you. They judge you by your looks. They judge you by your accent, by the way you think, by your politics, by your, everything. So writing is no different. But I think the task is to sort of free yourself in the writing, um, and be your most vulnerable, honest self on the page that you can be, and your most artistic self, which means you are also severe with yourself in terms of your craft.
Hmm.
And then what happens, and you find your tribe, and you find the people that get what you're trying to do, and they are your audiences, or audience, and the people that don't are not, they're just not your tribe.
Hmm.
mean, I've been called, artlessly confessional, and why do you have to write nasty poems, and why do you write about sex, and why do you write about this? And like, well, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry though, Sorry, not sorry. That's me. That's my work. You don't have to read it. But there are, other people who read it and take heart from it. And that's
Mhm.
what I want. And that's what I get from other poets.
Yeah, well, that's definitely really great advice. Let's see. I already said if you have any questions for Kim, leave them in the chat windows either on Facebook or YouTube. Helps if you put it all in bold, like question, so I can just the word question, so I can flip to it and see it back up quickly. And also, if you haven't clicked the like button yet, please do make sure to click the like button. We have twice as many people watching as have clicked like so far, and every time I say that, we get more likes, and then that helps it spread around more. So Kim, let's hear the next poem.
Sure. Let's see, where is this one? This is called Kansas 5 a.m. Oh, 4 a.m. Kansas 4 a.m. The train breaks to take the bend behind the grain mill. All night at the motel, you listen to the ice machine's cold labor. Does it ever stop? Thunk. No, says the vending machine as the next train goes by. On the highway, the big rigs whine, some carrying things that would kill you if one jackknifed off the overpass. The chicken truck passes with its load of small-brained misery. You can't hear the chickens, but you sort of think you can, the way you can almost hear the sounds of the bar car on the train. The bleary passengers trapped in their windows, peering through their doppelgangers at the black fields of wheat as they whiz past. Childhood, did it ever exist? What about the bar your father drank in, giving you endless quarters for pinball? There it goes, carried aloft by a maniacal wind. Before science, a lot of wind gods blew things around. The dead went to live on the moon. A man might be half scorpion, a woman half fish. An omniscient, omnipotent stranger who looked like Santa Claus and had a throne in outer space, knew everything about you, yet still somehow loved you unreasonably. Another chunk of ice clunks into the bin. Under your window, an insect in the bushes scrapes out its longing. The sounds of the world at this late hour sadden you, but then enters the rain, hastening down, the rain that wants to touch everything and almost does.
And that was Kansas 4 a.m. From Exit Opera, Kim Addonizio's newest book. Kim, there was a great question by Kimberly Gibson Tran, who says, about being kind. Do you ever show risky poems, essays, stories to people they may be partly about, or do you not recommend that?
Well, I can't blanketly recommend it or not recommend it, Kimberly, but I do show things to people that I care about, that I worry that if they read this, they're going to be, um, they're just going to be feel damaged in some way. And so I do definitely one of the essays in Bukowski and a Sundress is called How to Be a Dirty, Dirty Whore, which is actually about being a mother. And I showed it to my daughter because I was really concerned about what she thought about it, or what she would think about it. And I said, honey, if there's something in here that bothers you, please let me know. I don't want to publish this if you're gonna, if you're gonna feel weird about it or be freaked out and she was actually fine with it. And there were things I thought she didn't know that she was like, oh, mom, I knew that years ago. So, you know, she wasn't very surprised by anything I thought she might be surprised by or upset by. And you often don't know what's going to upset someone. Uh, so it can be tricky. I mean, there's not one answer. I think, if there's somebody you really care about and you're writing something, I think the main thing to remember is that it's your story too. It's not someone else's story, it's your story, and it may necessarily involve another person, but you have the right to tell your story. Now, if you can cast it various ways also. You can use a metaphor. You can write it in third person. You can change some details so that maybe they're less recognizable. So there are different ways you can play with that. But again, I think my watchword is just, be kind, but also recognize that you have the right to tell your own story.
Mhm. Yeah, again, great advice. I want to make sure we get through these poems. Let's do Bad Motel next.
Sure. Another 14-liner. I'm really fond of those. Bad motel. Isn't this a terrible motel? Aren't those people in the next room fucking? What else? Of course they are. Slamming the bed against the wall, and the toilet when we flush it roaring like a suckhole swallowing us down to hell. Okay, I love you. End of story. Okay, so we're just getting started. Air conditioner stuck on freezing. Kill it, and here comes suffocation and throwing off the sheets. Then that rotting narwhal corpse on the beach, gulls tugging out the blubber, enormous picked over spine dragged by the sea a few yards away. The thing is, maybe I finally have to give up falling on the rusty nails of affliction, combing through the trash for the magic ring to make me disappear. Whoever said love isn't pain didn't know what they were talking about, but neither did I when I said it's meant to fail. And do you feel me through the sobbing next door? Listen to their tenderness now.
Yeah, and that was Bad Motel by Kim Addonizio. Kim, there was a question from Dick Westheimer. He wanted to know, let's see if I can find it. He says, these poems are so interestingly lineated. Could you talk about how that happens for you? The line breaks. And one of the things I noticed, in this book is you have a lot of longer lines than you have in the past. More of the lines, jip past the end of the page. So what can you tell us about the line breaks and your choices for lineation, how that comes to be?
It's very frustrating when you're publishing poems to write long line poems. It's a constant problem and a constant source of irritation when you keep asking people to change the margins or to recognize that it's one long line. So there's that. But I actually started on long lines. I think Tell Me which was my third book, was really I was really influenced by C.K. Williams. And reading a lot of his work and really fascinated by his long line, as well as his syntax and his ways of sort of qualifying his thinking and the mind in the process of thinking. And so I was really experimenting in that book with a number of long-lined poems. And then and I think they've been in subsequent books, but not as much. But they sort of came back in A Vengeance in the last two books. In Now We're Getting Somewhere, which is the book before this one, and then in Exit Opera, which has a mix of long and shorter lines. And I'm drawn to the compression of shorter lines and shorter poems, like often 14-liners. But I'm also drawn to sort of the sprawl of a sort of more, I think in a way, a more conversational voice that a longer line allows. Where I'm still thinking about the music of the line, but the longer line seems to accommodate a more sort of informal kind of voice and diction to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I continue to be really interested in it and in what it can do. But I mean, I don't use it exclusively. I sort of end up finding whatever seems to work for the poem. And what I do a lot of is experimenting with lines and going back and forth. So if I write something in long lines, the next time I look at it, I might try it in shorter line tercets.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might try it in one long, shorter line things. And sometimes I'll just go back to the long lines. I'll just, but experimenting back and forth lets me sort of free up the material a little bit, and things start to, sometimes language changes as I make a longer line or a shorter line. And it's one thing that I just experiment with a lot to find the line length that seems to work, and the stanza structure as well that seems to work for a particular piece.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really enjoy too. Like once you have a body of text written that you feel like has a certain energy and rhythm to it, which means it's a poem, I guess. Then playing with how it looks is like just a fun. Like there's sort of like the pressure's off and you're just having fun with it, which makes that entertaining to me anyway. Let's see. There's a question. Denise Duhamel is here, last week's guest,
Yes.
And she says, Kim, this is such a terrific book, both a continuation of your honest look at female experience and a deepening of your politics and mortality. I know your influences, but are you aware of your influence over the next generation of poets? Is that something you think about?
God, no. It's a scary thought. Um, no, I am aware that there's a whole new generation that's come up since I was a baby poet, looking towards the people that were my mentors, mostly through their books and not personally. And so, and I'm aware of, the people that I'm teaching because I do a lot of poetry teaching privately. And so I try to mentor my students and try to, give them something. But I'm not so aware of anyone else out there unless they email me, and I do get emails. It's very gratifying. I get emails often from younger women and sometimes, quite young, like high school girls, saying, "Thank you so much for writing that poem. It really affected me, and I really responded to it." And that to me is the best thing that can happen, is to feel like your work went out in the world and somebody you didn't know saw it. And again, it gave them heart in some way. And so that just feels like the best thing that can happen for me as a writer is that someone is affected by my work and is able to handle something in their life because of it, or is inspired to write because of it. So I have no idea whether that's 5 people or 50 people, but I'm happy they're out there wherever they are, and I'm really gratified when somebody writes me and says, I really responded to this poem or this line or this book. Um, it makes me feel like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing in the world. I chose the right path.
Yeah, yeah, and being inspired to write is just such an important thing because writing itself adds such a richness and such a healing to your life if you're writing. And so finding, inspiring people to do that, it really is one of the best things you could be doing in the world, I think. Um, let's see, we have 2 poems left, and let's do Aria di Sorbetto next.
Sure. I have to say something about this because it's another opera poem. And the Aria di Sorbetto, in the days when opera was not the sort of um, expensive, fancy thing that it has become, people would go and they would eat and they would, talk. It was like, like in Shakespeare's time, like Shakespeare plays. Um, so that sort of crowd would be there. And the aria di sorbetto was an aria performed by often a minor character toward the end of the opera. And it was kind of like last call for alcohol, or last call for sorbet, last call for the things that they would come around hawking in terms of food. And so that was the aria. That was then called the Aria di Sorbetto.
Oh, that's
And then the
interesting.
opera would finish, with usually something from the major player dying or, or killing each other. Um, and so that's what the Aria di Sorbetto was. So I wrote this again in order to sort of for the opera theme. And so it's about I think the second or third from the end of the book. Aria di Sorbetto. Welcome to the abattoir. The opera is ending soon. Get a taste of this raspberry tart before the bad odor starts. We'll all get our ears pierced, then burst into tears. I just want to take off this fucking bra and stare dumbly at the shining Mediterranean. Dawn wants to come back as a whale, but be careful what you wish for. You might find yourself entangled in old fishing gear, strangled by a crab trap, dragging your enormous, exhausted heart for years until you succumb, sort of like the human you already are. Missing the gelato in that little Italian village. Opera. It sounds like a whale that swallowed a musical, and I loathe musicals. But that time Josh suddenly broke into song in the 8th Avenue subway, beside the bronze otterness sculptures, the workers and politicians, the alligator swallowing a businessman whose head is a money bag. A thin shiv of joy slipped under my ribs, and my daughter took my hand as the train shrieked in, and if you ask me to love this world, yes, oh yes, I will.
Yeah, another gorgeous poem. That is Aria di Sorbetto from Kim Addonizio's new book, Exit Opera. And with exits being such a topic on this in this book, Kim, what is it? I'm just wondering what you think about a life in poetry, and is that, why is that a thing that we should be doing? You know, we talked about just a second ago about how important it is to have people, you know, be inspired to write by you. But why is it that you feel like you chose this path and that it was the right path for you to be a poet?
Yeah, well, I said I chose it, but I think in a lot of ways the path chose me. And gave me a purpose in life when I really, I was very interested in music and very much trying to be a musician. And I thought that was the path I had chosen. And then poetry sort of said, no, this is what you really need to do. And I just found that was true. But I felt very lucky to find a purpose for my life. And a lot of people don't have a purpose. And it doesn't really matter, I mean, some people's purpose is just amassing wealth, and that's probably the least interesting and most destructive purpose. But if your purpose is raising a family and raising good children, great. If your purpose is being a good spouse, great. If your purpose is, protecting the vulnerable, great. I mean, there's so many ways to contribute to the world, and this happens to be mine. And I think it is an important contribution because even literacy, what's the point of being literate if there's no reason to read?
Mm-hmm.
Why do people read? Not just for information, but we read poems and we write poems, I think, to access something about the truths of being alive and being a conscious mortal being on the planet. And I think to express that consciousness is one of the tasks of poetry. And self-expression is, we all want to be seen and we all want to express something about our response to being here. And poetry is one form. The arts are a way to do that. They're not the only way, but they are one important way. And I can't imagine a life without the arts. And you may have a particular art you love and think that everybody needs it, but I'm not sure that's true. I don't think everybody needs opera or poetry or visual art, but we need some sort of art in our life and some apprehension of something beyond the material and
Mm-hmm.
some beauty. Or as a species, well, we may be doomed anyway as a species, but if there's any hope for us as a species, I think part of it lies in the way we connect with each other and connect our consciousness with another consciousness.
Yeah, really well said.
It's, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, well, let's close it out with one last poem, which is the last poem in the book, by way of a reminder.
Okay, and this, I think, this is the last poem in the book because I wanted to engineer some light at the end of the book. There is some in here, even though you may not think so right away. By way of a reminder, even though most of your family is underground, and your shield is made of cardboard, and the backyard is on fire again, it's best to ignore the sirens inviting you to join them, and instead befriend an out-of-tune banjo, a broken swing set, a grounded bee you can nurse with sugar water, or a trip to a sunflower. The many synonyms for dark, they have found me also. I assure you, even the leftovers in the fridge have regarded me with suspicion. Which of us is to be eaten next? Not a question to ask a marauding tiger or incel with a bump stock. But to be fair, any question at all is probably a bad idea in the moment when it's best to find the nearest wormhole. Mostly, you just need to keep walking deeper into the desert, breaking your spear on rocks, inscribing a few verses on whatever water you can find, even if it's full of bark scorpions breathing through their exoskeletons. Mostly, you need a night out, a new coat, a provider who doesn't drop the call in the middle of a sob, maybe some good weed. After that, it's up to the gods, who can't exactly be counted on if history is any predictor. But that's no reason to lose heart. Look, A stray cat has found the recycling bin of empty tuna cans outside on the porch and wants in.
Yeah, great way to end that book and the Rattlecast. Thanks so much for sharing that. It was by way of a reminder by Kim Addonizio from her book, of course, Exit Opera. Kim, it's been such a pleasure talking to you and getting to explore this book, as your books always are. Thanks for being here and being a guest.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Alison, for the gods at the end of your poem as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, and take care. Hope you get back soon with the next book, too.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim.
Yep.
Thanks,
Bye, Kim.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Kim Addonizio, and her new book, of course, is Exit Opera. You can find all of her books, the 9 books of poetry mentioned, 2 novels, 2 story collections, 2 books on writing poetry, so much there at kimaddonizio.com. That's KIMADDONIZIO.com. Find it all at kimaddonizio.com. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to... Let me hang on a second. I got the wrong one up. The prompt for this week was to right here. Oh, maybe not. Okay, let's do it differently. The prompt for this week was to, I don't know why I don't have it. The prompt for this week was to write a poem. There we go. Write a poem with a title that begins with Poem in Which I, after Denise Duhamel. For the next word in the title, find a random verb on randomwordgenerator.com. So that is your prompt for this week. Write a poem with a title that begins with a poem in which I, after Denise Duhamel. For the next word in the title, find a random verb on randomwordgenerator.com. So we're going to do that, figure out all the poems, and that's going to be the prompt lines for this week. I'll figure out why I have the wrong slide. But in the meantime, how you do it if you'd like to share a poem in that vein is, so we want to have about 3 minutes on camera for everybody. Try not to go on too long. Sorry if I ask you questions and stretch a little bit, but it's share a poem from this prompt, 1 page max, and then email your poem to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines, all one word, at rattle.com, and then I can show it on the screen as you read. Then find the Zoom link in the chat windows on YouTube or Facebook. And I'll post them right now, and you can join the Zoom, but only if you have a poem you would like to share. If you want to just sit back and enjoy all the poems that we're going to be sharing today, just to keep watching right where you are right now on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But if you want to join the Zoom link, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, that was the wrong slide. The actual prompt, that was the right slide, but I didn't
prompt
update
in which
it.
we have the wrong slide of.
The prompt in which, yeah, it was this once again about to write it in which poem, and
After Denise Duhamel.
after Denise Duhamel, yeah.
Yes.
And so that is your prompt for this week.
So I am excited because I wanted to write one of these. It was somewhat of a selfish, selfish prompt. And so also too is interesting because first of all, I love the conversation with Addonizio. It was really enlightening and wonderful. And funnily enough, my poem, which I know you haven't read yet because I finished it about 5 seconds before you added to the show notes, really kind of hits at what you guys were talking about at the end of that discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious to hear it. Let's give it a listen.
Okay. Oh, first I have to say also that I slightly cheated in the title. So I'm allowed to cheat because I can't submit a poem to myself, right?
I guess so, yeah.
So the word I actually got was read or read. And I was going to do poem in which I read no poems, but I thought I would allow myself to sneak the never in there. So the title didn't sound like crap. So
Okay. Well, you got the verb right.
yeah.
Okay.
It was a fun one to land on. Okay. Poem in which I never read a poem, after Denise Duhamel. Suppose it was, instead, a comic book that kerplunked into my lap. Not Frost, not Poe, but a neon grid. Without the pow of poetry, I filled my empty balloon with sharpied words written by some other. All the while, the unlabeled words dashed away. How even cayenne loses its heat after decades stashed in the pantry. I stuffed myself with recipes, even wrote about the way a butter-basted turkey should reflect the harvest moon. But every time I raised my spoon, I'd see the empty silver space still reserved for someone I would never meet. Longing is living without, knowing that I spilled my souffle somewhere along the way, offering my platter of caviar-topped quail eggs to a room of shrugging strangers. And the leftovers, just the sense that some things taste like nothing else, missing the umami of my own words in my own mouth.
Oh, that's a great. I love the ending there. The umami.
Thank you.
Yeah, great Ars Poetica.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I would have become a food writer that was overly poetic in my language is my summary. So
Yeah, well, I think you might have for sure, and I know you did do a little bit of food
a little
writing.
bit of food writing, some food reviews in there. Yeah, and what's
Appropriate
fun.
for our upcoming food poems.
Yeah,
issue,
that's true. So I'm interested to see what you came up with.
Yeah, so my word was just shine.
Okay.
So poem in which I shine. I thought about doing something, adding to it, but I decided let's just shine. Why not?
Let's shine when given the chance.
Okay, yeah. This is a poem in which I shine. After all these years, finally, I think, looking down at my hand shining in the otherwise dark of the evening office, I hadn't noticed the sun dropping below the upper arch of the west window, or its orange glow fading to that metallic blue. I would have turned on a lamp by now. But now you are the lamp, I think, and it's true, every vein and artery filled as a filament with sparks or with stars or whatever burns in the distance. Even the tiny branching hairs of the capillaries are gathering their tiny electric arc so that all of the flesh, every flake and follicle is a part of the shine throwing shadows to the ends of the room. Finally, the world can see me, I think. If I move, I might trip the fuse. That is my poem in which I shine.
Aw, you do shine, and you've also been battling some very bright lights on Critique of the Week in particular.
That is true. I think
so
that was what creeped into the poem.
Yeah, that came into the poem, the sunlight finding its way into everything.
Yeah, it is nice, though, in the Rattlecast where we do it at night.
Yeah, we don't have that concern for some reason. Not yet, at least.
All right. Well, those are our poems for this week. Let's see what everybody else has for us. And we'll start first with Carla Schwartz.
Oh, hi. What a
Hey,
great
Carla.
night. Hi.
Hey, Carla.
And
Yeah, good to see you.
yeah, good to see everybody. This is, and I'm sorry I didn't write after Denise. I'm trying to figure that out. I know I listened to your thing, but we'll talk about that. You'll talk about that later. Okay. So, poem in which I fear I'll break everything.
Interesting.
Can't walk, or I will break my foot. If the forecast says snow, I should break out the salt, even for a half inch, because I can't walk, or I will break my foot. If I walk downstairs, I'll find my basement ceiling broken, pieces on the floor soaked like a rum cake, which is not good, as I'm an alcoholic, sober now 40 years. I can't pick up the broken pieces or mouse poop, might rain on my head. If I run away from it, I might break my foot. I can't lift heavy things because I might break my back. If there's a power outage, I'm afraid I won't be able to lift my garage door to get the car out because I might strain my back, and just the weight of it will break my foot. I'm afraid of the next thing that might break in my house, so I pay extra to extend any warranty, replace any appliance more than 2 years old, purchase a new service contract. I'm afraid anything might go wrong, and if it doesn't, I make sure it does. Before turning it on, I leave a spoon in the bowl in the microwave by accident. When the repairmen come, I follow them around, up and down the stairs, praying I don't break my foot.
Yeah, very interesting poem in which I fear I'll break everything. And Carla, I imagine, and given your life on boats and all the things that you do and all the many adventures, is this someone that's very far from your own personal feelings, or were you tapping into something hidden deep down?
I was, no, you are correct. Well, also, I think Denise tried to fictionalize the characters that she became, and that was kind of where I was going, so not tapping into my deepest fears, thankfully.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. It's always fun, having reports from your adventures. Thanks for sharing that, Carla.
Thanks, Carla.
Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, it was Carla Schwartz with a poem in which I fear I'll break everything. Let's go next to Christiana Doucette.
Hi.
Hey, Christiana.
So mine isn't an imaginary life. I tried. Okay, so I wrote like 3 or 4 of these this week, just trying different things. And I tried one in free verse and I didn't like how that went. I did one as a pantoum and it came out a little bit better, but I still wasn't pleased with it. So then I tried again and I got this prompt. It was poem in which I weigh. And then I also used it to look up a noun to follow that because I was like, well, I don't want to just go. I wanted it to push me a little bit further, and it came up with breath, and it immediately brought up an idea for me, and so that's what I went with. And I wrote this one as a terza rima. Did I pronounce that right? I'm actually not sure if I've ever. I must have heard it said out loud.
I think I've heard people say it terza, like with a little bit of a teasy, but I don't know if that's true. I think terza rima.
It sounded good to me,
but I'm probably wrong.
Okay. So this one is in which I weigh breath. The day you came was measured in our breath. First mine in aching arches on the road, then yours, so shallow that we feared cold death had snatched the life so recently bestowed. The midwife, masked herself with COVID spread, snapped a smaller mask on you and strode toward the well-stocked counter by the bed. The breaths I counted through turned cold and fierce, each one without your cry, heavy with dread. It might have been a moment or long years I lay there bleeding yellow milk and blood, each absent wail an anvil to my ears. I knew an eon in each heartbeat thud. I knew the grueling weight of every gasp, the weight of panicked breath, a daggered flood of horrors that my mind refused to grasp. They worked as afterbirth contractions seethed. I rose upon my elbows, voice a rasp, desperate to see the baby underneath, and then a shriek as air itself resheathed, then light at last, for finally you breathed.
Oh, that's such a powerful poem. And then we have the photograph too of this here. Yeah.
My youngest was born in April of 2020. And so everything had just shut down. And some of the aspects of it felt like just really surreal. Like everyone had to be masked except for me. And then after she was born, because she was so still and wasn't crying, then she had to be masked too. And it just really stuck with me.
Yeah, well, really, really powerful story and a great form for that poem too. Thanks so much for sharing that, Christiana.
Thank you.
Thanks, and good job writing at least 3 prompt poems for this week too. That's impressive alone.
The other 2 I feel like were pretty lousy, so I'm
that's
glad
why we just write. That's good. 3 poems. That's what counts.
It's like just gotta keep trying.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Christiana. It's a pleasure as always. Yes, Christiana Doucette with In Which I Weigh Breath. Next, let's go to Dick Westheimer.
Hey all, can you hear me okay with
We
my
can, yeah.
earbuds?
We
Yeah,
can.
great to
Hey,
hear you,
Dick.
Dick. Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, good. On the road here in central Maine where it's blowing or
Wow.
Vermont. I even got and I forgot to put after Denise Duhamel on my poem. Apologize
Oh,
for
it will
that,
never be
especially after
forgiven. No, it won't. Don't forget.
especially after participating in a whole hour and a half conversation about
That's
after
true.
poems.
Yeah.
Um, so my word was inspect.
Hmm.
So here we go. Poem in which I inspect the fabric hair label. I never noticed the tag sewn discreetly behind my knee. I guess my mother was afraid to clip it off. Maybe she thought the do not remove under the penalty of law was meant for her. My wife noted it before I did. What's this? She said as she thumbed at it absently. She held a mirror for me to read the fine print, made of flesh and insecurities, washed gently, hand dry, prone to wonder if he is loved no matter how tenderly treated. She nuzzled her cheek on my chest, stroked the loose skin on my neck, and then turned over and headed towards sleep. The label fluttered against my calf, and I understood why it was not wise to detach it. How else was I to understand why, even with her caress still humming and 40 years of knowing the answer is yes? I fret over what she'll think of me pulling her close, folding the soft fabric of her into the care label of me.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful poem. I love where you
Yeah.
went with that. And a really cool, it's just prompt, to go from that inspecting to a fabric care label. I like that.
Yeah, I'll think of you the
Well,
next time I look at one and disregard its instructions.
disregard its instructions or realize you can actually trim those things off. Tim, just a friendly amendment from what you said. You said, I love where you went with the poem. And as you know, mostly this is what happens is where the poem takes you.
Yeah. That's right. Well, I was speaking to the deeper you.
You should have
The subject-
spoken to the
Right,
poem and
exactly.
ignored Dick Westheimer.
Well, that's what the friggin' poems tend to do is just sort of ignore me and take on a life of their own. So
Yeah, only the
anyway,
best ones, too.
yeah. Good. Thanks so much, both of
Yeah,
you.
well, safe
Appreciate
travels.
you.
Good to see
Thanks,
you, Dick.
Dick.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
It was Dick Westheimer with a poem in which I inspect the fabric care label. Let's go to a first-time caller with Kimberly Gibson Tran here.
Hello there.
Hey, Kimberly.
Hi,
Yeah, thanks so
Kimberly.
much for joining.
I have to say that Kimberly sent me a really interesting email that I would love for you to share with us in reference to our Poetry Space episode on after poems.
Oh, okay.
Last Rattlecast episode when I was listening to it, I heard Katie mention we're going to talk about after poems, and I was like, oh, this is my thing. Like 10 years ago, I wrote a thesis about, and I actually named the genre. I call them prompted poems. The word a prompt, if you look it up in the OED, is an archaic word. It doesn't really exist in use anymore, but it means to borrow. And I just like that it's also cognate with the word prompt, which is kind of like what these are doing. They're borrowing, but also being kind of fed by the idea. My thesis is a little more narrow, two poems I could search up by title. So I did, mine is about the poems beginning with a line or ending with a line by somebody. And I loved your episode, part 1, which is like, that was what I was obsessed with, the risk of of referencing someone, and you're giving away power in your poem, but you're also maybe doing something to that other poem and poet. And yeah, it's a bit of a risk. So I actually don't prefer to write after poems because I've spent so much time thinking about the risks, but I did try my hand at this one.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. And thanks so much for sharing your concept of a prompted poems. I really like that term. Yeah, and I would have put it in the episode of the Poetry Space how we managed to connect before we filmed the episode. So I think it's brilliant, though.
Thank you so much. Okay, so my randomly generated word is the verb fold. And it's funny because I'm like, that's such a plain word. And then I was like, wait a minute, I know exactly what this poem is about. So this is a poem in which I promptly fold my laundry. After Denise Duhamel. I conquered a lifetime of biting my nails, which produce elegant slivers of moons. My mother or husband no longer turns pale at the dull sound of ground keratin. My new goal is to come up with a schedule for purging the toilet bowl of its ghastly orange streaks. Invent a world in which I've tackled the urge to shit. I'll do it on company time, so to speak, and pick up groceries after clocking off work. I won't have left the canvas bags for the planet crumpled at the garage door. In fact, the clerk adores me, rings me up in admiration. I plan it so my gas tank is never less than quarter full. That way, I don't live in a world in which I panic call my husband in traffic. Folded clothes show I've grown, smooth the hitch in my giddy up, quit drafting poems at dawn. Celestial, I sponge dawn in my coffee cup so it doesn't build a crust. I get down with adulting. I have stopped fucking up.
That's a great ending.
That is great. A poem we can all aspire to.
Yeah,
As we have
definitely.
the clothes sitting.
I did some of the laundry while I was listening to the first part of the Rattlecast.
Good job. Yeah.
We do. It's very
definitely
appropriate.
have a bin full of clothes and a dryer, a washing machine full
That's
of
right. And
clothes.
we haven't asked Kimberly yet where she's calling from.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Where are you calling from, Kimberly?
I am also in Texas, just in North Dallas.
Oh, okay.
Oh, great. Well, that's wonderful. I had a feeling based on where your thesis was located. So,
Oh, yeah, UNT.
yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for being here. Hope you can come back again soon.
Yeah.
Kimberly, that was great.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. That was Kimberly Gibson Tran with a poem in which I promptly fold my laundry.
It's a very
That's great,
impressive
yeah.
feat.
That is. And the promptly is so important, too.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go next to David Boos.
Hi, thanks everybody.
Hi.
Hey, David. Great to see you.
Good to be back. Thanks. You made the mistake last week of inviting me back. So here I am.
Well, that's great. Your
Yay,
poem
that's
last week was
great.
wonderful. I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear this next one.
So my verb randomly selected was avoid, and it took a while to find something. But then my wife pointed out a moon out the window, and it kind of came together. So this is a poem in which I avoid looking directly at the sun. You look like hell, I said. So do you, he said, both of us grinning. In truth, he looked too fucking normal for someone who was dying. As always, so much was left in what we didn't say. He'd called the week before, out of the blue, told me about the shadow on the screen, the terminology, metastatic, inoperable, prognosis. Shit, I said. In college, we'd had the chance to watch a total solar eclipse, a once-in-a-lifetime event, they said. Long before paper eclipse glasses sold to the masses on the internet, long before the internet, but we knew enough not to look directly at the sun. It was spring, and the maple trees spread their broad green hands over us, sieving sunlight through their fingers onto the streets and dappling them with pinholes of light that shifted slightly with the breeze. And as the moon moved in the sky, 1,000 tiny suns appeared on the ground, each a bright crescent, waning as we watched, the daylight slowly graying, until, together, they all winked out. And then we could look up, not at the sun, but at what its umbral shadow revealed, silhouettes of the maples and the once day-blind stars, black crows confused, searching for their evening roosts. And for the few brief moments of darkness, we knew exactly where we were in the universe. Now, in his bright kitchen, we talk about the living, My job, our kids, how the Lakers are doing. We laugh in the way we always have. There's much we do not say. Through the window, the pale crescent of a fading moon hangs amidst the bare branches of a maple in the winter morning sky. I stare at it for a long time.
Yeah, beautiful poem again. A poem in which I avoid looking directly at the sun. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, David. Great poems. Glad you're coming back.
Thanks.
Come back next week too.
Yeah,
Here's your next invite.
We'll see if I can do anything with the prompts.
We'll string them along.
Just don't forget that you'll never see them again. All right. Well, thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, once again, David Booth with the poem in which I avoid looking directly at the sun.
Good advice.
Yeah, let's go to Nate Jacob next.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Nate. Great to see you.
The pleasure's all mine. All right. Well, I got a word that I would never use about myself.
I can confirm, I think.
Yeah.
Although you do comply with the 1-page max. I think you've never gone
Hey, that's
over
a good
since we
point.
started
And
that,
thank
yeah.
you for that, Nate.
I respect your authority. So my poem is called Poem in Which I Comply. But what do you do if you find yourself caught out in the moment when the magic turning of the day, the month, or the year, the Christmas Eves, the birthdays dreaded, the nth anniversary of your father's death, when the lights, the calendar pages, and the ghosts and gods and time, its old self, run amok in the misty inversions? Keep walking, keep your eyes low, your voice lower still, as not to disturb the way time ripples through in perfect circles meant to be blanketed by darkness, silenced in the muscling weight of night. Step lightly. Time is passing. How it does is eternity's secret.
Very good. Nice sonnet there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Nate. Always such a
Thanks
pleasure.
for giving me the space.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Nate.
It was Nate Jacob with Poem in Which I Comply.
The one time he complied. We got a good thing it's written down. He sounds like he's so curmudgeon. He's not. He's like so nice. I'm sorry, Nate. I feel bad.
Yeah, very fun. Thanks, Nate. Nate Jacob. Let's go next to Bethany Jarmal is here. So we had, I saw Hayden Saunier in the chat. And we had Denise Duhamel in the chat. We had Kim and Anita here. Bethany's going to be the guest in about a month. I think it's like February 22nd, maybe. So great to see you on too, Bethany. How you doing?
Great to see you. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and we're going to be sharing your new book. What's the book called?
Yeah, it's called Lightning is the Mother.
Awesome. Yeah. So, really looking forward to that and having you on. With, all you do, spreading poetry around in so many ways. It's going to be fun to talk.
For sure.
So what do you have for us this week on the prompt lines?
Yeah, so I got the word bleed. So not what I was expecting to get. I love what I love about prompts and why I keep writing to all of Katie's prompts, because they're wonderful, first off, is how it forces you to write something that maybe you wouldn't have written otherwise. And so that is the case with this one. So, Poem in Which I Bleed. For the first time at 13, at that charismatic church, up that gravel road in that rural Appalachian town, during youth group, with the 4 of us teens, our fathers, the church's only deacons. I fled the purple carpet and purple padded chairs and purple banner with El Shaddai and a dove hand-stitched, and locked myself in the women's room with red and red and red. I thought to use my sock as I'd read in some preteen magazine, but I looked down and saw my Old Navy flip-flops. Some wadded up toilet paper would have to do. For an hour, I sat cross-legged, stealing glimpses at Jesus' portrait, the blood dripping down his brow with every thorn as I squeezed my thighs until they were sore. At home, I threw the soiled garment in the trash and found a maxi pad. When I confessed to Mom, she rescued the panties and scrubbed them in the tub, scolding me, for in that house, wastefulness was the darkest stain. and blood was how we were cleansed like snow.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, great,
Yeah.
great storytelling in that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah. And
Bethany.
looking forward to your full episode soon.
Yeah, me too.
You too. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
take care. Yeah, that was Bethany Jarman with Poem in Which I Bleed. Let's go to Nivedita next, if she's there, making sure she catch her before she got to go back to work.
Yep.
Are you there, Nivi?
Hello.
Hey, Nivi. Yeah.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Katie. How are you guys
Hi.
doing?
Yeah,
Good.
I'm
Hello.
doing great. Great to see
Yeah.
you.
Good to be here. How are you guys doing?
Good. Yeah. So, what did you do with your prompt? What did you get for your word?
I got the word stop.
Oh, that's tough.
So many possibilities, though. There's a lot of things you
Yeah.
could stop.
Yeah.
Infinite possibilities, actually. It's a great start. It's what I would say.
Okay. Well, let's hear. Go
my-
ahead. So you went
My
with
poem is titled, yes,
mhm.
Poem in Which I Stop to Breathe.
Mm.
The rush slows. The pavement, slick with rain, reflects headlights in shivering lines. I inhale damp air, metallic, electric, alive. Each breath anchors me to the stillness hidden beneath the city's roar. Around me, people surge forward, feet pounding, phones glowing, while I stand here, a quiet witness to my own pause, listening to the rhythm of lungs expanding as if they've only just learned how.
Oh, that's great.
Thank
Love
you.
that ending. Yeah, great
Yeah.
turn there. Yeah. Yeah, poem in which I stop to breathe. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a
Yep.
great day.
Yep, you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yep, it was Nivi DeKarthik with poem in which I stop to breathe. Let's go to Brian O'Sullivan next.
Hello.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian. Yeah, good to see you.
Hi. Yeah, it's great to be here. So I kind of went for comic relief this week.
No, we always look forward to it from
Me
you,
too.
Brian.
Yeah, I think it's like a 3 out of 4 comic.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
always
that's
think
great.
of your frozen meatball haiku.
Yeah, that's one of the best for sure.
Thank you. This is called Poem in Which I Run Amok. And I wasn't able to put after because, well, you'll see. Poem in which I run amok and write like I don't give a fuck. Oh, poem in which I push my luck and make the proper folks say yuck. Poem that barrels like a Mack truck through all the barren mire and muck of words. Poem with your shirt on tucked. Poem that's like a big knuckle sandwich and makes the reader upchuck. Poem that cracks like the oddest duck. Poem in which I'm getting stuck. Poem accounting its title has snuck its way to being a sonnet with pluck. Lie quiet now, poem. Stop being a schmuck.
Oh, that's really fun, Brian. I'm so glad you wrote that.
Thank
And I
you.
would suggest you should send that to Light.
Yeah.
They'd
Yeah,
love
that's right.
that poem. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
definitely.
should.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. Very fun as always. There's Brian O'Sullivan with poem in which I run amok.
He did run amok.
He definitely
Lives
did.
up to the title.
Let's go to Tina Dennetclaw next.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi.
Tina.
Hi,
Great to see
how are
you.
you guys?
We're
Hi.
good. Yeah.
Good, good, good. So, so I got the word swear,
Hmm.
and growing up, nobody that I was around ever would swear. My parents, their families, my friends' families, no, but nobody was swearing. So this was kind of an odd one for me, except for my Aunt Virginia. And for her, damn was just a part of speech. So she said that. The next word was always damn.
That's
But
great.
if she didn't say that,
Part of
if she,
kind of want to try that on. Sounds fun.
yeah, it's, this the parts of speech that you learn that was part of it. But if she didn't say, if she said damn without that in front of it, then she really was swearing, and it was followed by more words that were, like exactly where you're going to go when you're damned. So at any rate, this was kind of fun for me to do, because eventually, as you will find out, I did learn to swear. Okay, so this is the poem in which I swear after Denise Duomo. I'm sorry, sorry.
Duhamel. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, thank you. This is the poem in which I swear, as swearing goes for me. Not quite polite, once I needed to explain what SOL means. The older I get, the easier it is to say damn it, not darn it. Grandma used to say dag nabbit. Dad said criminy. I don't recall my mother ever swearing. A sharp breath in did the same. My sister uses the F word. I can't even write it. A sagely friend remarked at work, shit rises to its own level. It sounded so right. And so that is my swear word when something is just plain wrong. Shit.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Really fun poem. And I can't relate, but and my parent,
Do
my
I
dad.
curse more than you? I think I
probably,
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks so much, Tina.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Oh, thank you.
It was Tina Dennett-Claw with "This is the poem in which I swear." And really, what a fun prompt, Like there's so many places these are going.
Well, this prompt wrote itself after Denise. I can't take much credit for this one.
Let's go to Mary Lisa T. Diminishes next.
Hi.
Hey, Mary Lisa.
So I pulled a Christine. I wrote, well, not 3 poems, but 2. And I changed my mind at the last minute over which one I was going to read. So
Oh, and
So
we have the photographic evidence too.
I like this. Gotta
Yeah.
show this.
Yeah, so
And-
Show this. Here's the evidence.
I am not great at chat. So I don't like that chat GPT stuff. It's very foreign to me. So I could have probably had more fun if I would have devoted more time to experimenting. But so yeah, I got bury. And my first thought was bury the lead. So I went with that one, although I was like, oh, bury my head, bury the body, bury me with it. Like there were so many ways. So
Yeah.
but I wanted to read this one because it is my very first guzzle. And
Oh,
I
that's great.
Exciting.
I know. It's so weird, but I am so happy.
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah,
I've been
that's great.
trying. Oh, I've been putting it off for like 9 months. Okay, so let me not take up everybody's time here. Poem in which I bury the lead after Denise Duhamel. I want to sleep like grass in the cow's mouth. Not yet, but one day to sleep in the hungry cow's mouth. I've eaten the cow. I should give it back its life. Kiss it 1,000 times on its loud mooing mouth. I've kissed 1,000 boys, too many boys. My body of bread I broke off to melt in their mouths. I could maybe kiss them again, each one more time. Still, I wouldn't be ready to enter the ocean's mouth. I don't believe I'll ever be ready for heaven. I can't imagine no sound or song after all mouth inside my head all the time. Motor mouth, loud mouth, whisper mouth, constant mouth, smart mouth, for more than feeding my body's needs, not for kissing the toes of statues, a useful mouth, not nagging like a stage manager, like time pushing toward death, that great unknown mouth. I want to keep what I know and learn more as Mary Lisa. Never be a ghostly howl, have an everlasting mouth.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I love the title sets up an anticipation for where the lead's going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I love my body of bread I broke off to melt in their mouths. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Great gazelle. Congratulations on your first. Mary.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
a
I'm
challenging
gonna-
form. I only have one I think I've written that I somewhat like, and I don't even like.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the form that I've failed the most. at writing
Yeah,
poems.
yeah,
Of all
I
the-
think.
Yeah.
I think I had a few false starts, but once I got the mouth and I figured out some ways to go with it, yeah, that helped.
Great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. All right, good night.
Good night.
Yeah, Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with Poem in Which I Bury the Lead. Let's go next to Melody B.
Hello.
Hey, Melody.
Hi.
Yeah, so glad you could come back again. Yeah.
Yeah, good to be here. So the word I got this week was view, and I kind of knew right where I was going to go with it because a couple of days prior, my husband and I had a spontaneous breakfast date, and
Aw.
it's like my favorite thing. And there was a random moment where he took a picture of me just candidly during the date, and I was like, "Why are you videotaping me?" Whatever. But he said it was a cute moment, and then he showed me it later, and I felt like I couldn't recognize myself, and so I took that picture and I kind of wrote this poem after.
Oh, that's such a sweet
Yeah,
story.
I love that
yeah.
story. I'm excited for this.
Well, thanks. All right, here's the poem. Poem in which I view myself through his eyes. I do not recognize her, slant between two lines, face open as a full moon rising. She is warmth contained, a compassionate gaze. Grace flows through parted lips. Cold wind blows kisses against the pane as limbs bend down to spring the vault of laughter in her eyes. Fingers delicately entwined, she is present enough to love her own likeness.
Aw, yeah, I love that last line. And great story.
Yeah, I have to ask too. Have you showed this to your husband? And how does he feel?
I did. I shared it with him before sharing here. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think you'll get more breakfast dates with writing poems like that.
Yeah, the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that too. So it works.
Thanks so much, Melody.
Aww.
Yeah.
I want a breakfast date.
Well,
let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Melody. It was Melody Bonilla with a poem in which I view myself through his eyes. Next, we'll go to Jared Campbell stretching over there.
Reigning prompt poet of the month, Jared Campbell?
No, none other.
Wow.
Hey, Jared.
Yep. Hello.
Hi.
So I got the word suit, which is quite a verb, right?
That is, yeah.
Yeah. Poem in which I suit my first real job.
I love it already.
Great use of suit.
A partner and I make small talk while water saturates the K-cup. My smile is relaxed as we discuss whatever it is partners discuss at coffee machines. We laugh at the same times and for the same amount of time. He feels seen. I understand when the exchange is over and end the conversation in a normal way and leave without forgetting to take my coffee with me. Back at my desk, I adjust my tie not because it's askew, but because I enjoy the feeling of silk. I dial in 1 minute early to the merger agreement call. I'm well prepared and state my client's preferences persuasively. When the counterparty's lawyer is replying, I don't think of the misplaced commas in his speech. I don't think of the smell of my wife's hair or the blossoms just beginning to fall from the magnolia trees in Central Park. I am fully present in the merger agreement. My moment is a searchlight, which can be turned at will to illuminate any object for 6 minutes at a time. It's agreed that I will hold the pen for now. I confidently promise to turn the agreement by a certain date because I know how long it takes me to do work. My mind is frictionless. It transforms information into product as inevitably as heat turns water to steam. After the call, I attend to emails, dispensing prompt, accurate advice to each client, devoting my full attention to each as if they are my only client. For 6 minutes, that client is my only client. And then I turn my mind to the merger agreement. I become the unrestricted flow of words. I enjoy my work, and I take pride in my work. But my joy and pride do not cloud my judgment, for I am not driven by joy or pride, but by the experience of the work itself. I am not alienated from my labor. I see myself in my work, for my mind is a mirror that reflects exactly the work appointed to it 6 minutes at a time.
That was great. It's so much fun in that one, Jared. And I can't help but like think of that one as like a video poem, you know, how fun that would be as like a movie or like the opening like monologue to some kind of movie too.
In black and white for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was really fun. Thanks so much for sharing
funny.
that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you.
Yep, Jared Campbell with poem in which I suit my first real job.
That's how I felt when I tried to work in an office. I felt like I was impersonating an office worker. Like, yes, I am efficient. My mind is not drifting out the window.
Well, I've never worked at an office.
It was an internship for 6 weeks and the only real job I've ever had.
Not bad. All right. Well, let's go next to Audrey Friedman.
Good evening.
Hi, Audrey. Good to see you.
Another fun prompt, Katie. I I was assigned the word cut by my random word generator. If I carefully chip the overgrowth of a first draft, letting modifiers loose, peppering the air with adjectival and adverbial dust, someone will call me a hatchet woman, a mad poet with an axe, violently hacking limbs of a sapling. No, remember the art of the bonsai master and how painstaking the process of perfection. The tree needs constant pruning of all growth beyond its intended shape, needs to lean towards its observers and invite them to draw close. No tree, large or small, fears scrutiny or intimacy. They reach forward with graceful limbs, and who would think to call the master gardener a mad hatchet woman?
Oh, that's really fun too. Yeah. Yeah, so many this week. Thanks for sharing that, Audrey.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It was Audrey Friedman with a poem in which I cut. Let's go next to Maro Dowdle.
Hi.
Hey, Maro.
How are you guys?
Great.
Prompt line is on fire this week. I'm freaking blown away. And I mean, if that prompt wrote itself, I mean, that's a winner. I love it. So I got freeze as my verb, and I really wanted to write a funny poem. Katie, you know that I'm really trying to write funny.
You do write funny normally too. You're great at it. It's not trying to, but you don't have to. It can only come organically.
I know. This did not come out funny, so I'm sorry, but here's what came.
Okay.
Poem in which I freeze after Denise Duhamel. Ice cracks on January branches. Red Carolina mud stiffens. Mice and squirrels have skittered to their burrows. I get lost in the woods all the time. It's like a talent. Usually I find my way out somehow. This time is different. Night has fallen, no moon to light a path. I start to shiver. Dried leaves abundant, I buried my legs, then waist and chest, build a wreath around my head, then arms tuck in. I look up, surprised somehow by the darkness I'd almost forgotten. This craving to be loved, then how I can't receive it, turn from those who want to give it. My lips burn, nose grows numb, and then I hear it. The woods alive with human chatter, walkie-talkie static, the German shepherd on my scent, rescue party. In wide-brimmed hat, reflective vest, a ranger with my face lifts me from my nest. Then something shifts like doubt. Their light snaps off, they fade, pan out. That's me still buried, but my eyes are shut.
Yeah, I love there's a great movement in that poem.
Yeah, there really is. And it was brought about because there was a little humor in there, Maura, so with the talent for getting lost in the woods. And then we're able to go deeper because we had the moment of levity at the beginning.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So there you go. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mara. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so glad you could come back. A lot, everybody here, the new time people last week all came back.
I know. I can't believe I was with Mara only just over a week ago, though, at the Pacific Residency. It's wild. And actually, too, speaking of scary things, I had a nightmare that we missed the shuttle bus on the way back. We were both so afraid because it was at 2:30 a.m. and we had an emergency strategy.
Oh, the 2:30 a.m. bus, never again.
And I really did. I had a nightmare last night that we missed the bus. So I told him we did not. I'm proud of us. Yeah.
Yeah, it was right out of middle school.
Yeah, it was straight out of middle school. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for coming back, Maro. It was Maro Dowdle once again with a poem in which I freeze. And we will go next to Hemant Malik.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi, Hemant.
My word was need. And I tried to be a little bit lighter this time. I tried a few times to start this poem, and this is what I ended up with. A poem in which I need to record for a reality TV show after Denise Duhamel. My son walks in on me explaining towards the backsplash how the onions must be opaque and not browned, then walks straight back out again. Sorry about that, I say, and grin as I tilt the pan for a close-up view. My demonstration of how nude shoes with bare legs can add height is interrupted by my mother's knock. Are you okay? I public smile, raise my eyebrows and whisper towards the mirror, sorry, be right back, and tell Mum sweetly I'm on a call. In Coles, my explanation of how 20% fat in the mince can revolutionize your burgers seems to prompt security to meat and seafood aisle. I've considered wearing a recording in progress sign on my back, but I'm not one to draw attention to myself. So I'm alone at the river with my fishing rod, tackle box and bait, ready to outline exactly how to hook and cast and wait. But the signal keeps dropping out, and I have no idea what to do now as I stare at the SOS in the corner and my sunlit face mirrored on the screen.
Oh, that was wonderful again, and then the humor creeps in too. I think we were talking about humor with Denise right last week, and so
even just reading Denise's work is so inspiring too to look at all the humor there. So it's crept into everybody's poems. I feel like a lot of them.
That makes for a really fun show. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Hemant. A pleasure as always.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Hemant Malik with a poem in which I need to record for a reality TV show.
I feel like I want to just write everyone's title like as a poem to everyone's. Like I would love to write that poem too. That'd be so fun. Poem in which I need to record for a reality TV show. It's great.
It is.
Titles alone are wonderful.
All right. Well, let's go next to Laura Berg.
Hey.
Hi, Laura. Great to see you.
I'm so enjoy the after poem discussion. It's really interesting. Yeah. And tonight, I wasn't expecting as many serious, lyrical, touching poems that we've been hearing in addition to the fun ones, but mine I got confused and it's a bit silly. But here we go.
We love silly too. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hear
it. This is the poem in which I turn upside down, losing my marbles and their biggies, smashers, bonkers, no peewees. If I put one in a slingshot and aim high, it could zing through the exosphere to form a new planet, and I'd blast off next, like those moguls who are selling our dear Earth out. Get rid of your old stuff, my kids tell me. This is the country of the future. I turn my mind's drawers upside down, dump crumbs in knee-highs, turn the trash upside down as well, as in my hurry I may have mistakenly tossed me out. And if when I find me I stand on my head, an old family trick for curing migraines. Even this hen I hold I turn upside down, wings folded, toes poking up and flailing in the current-fetid atmosphere of the land of the free, which is becoming intolerable even for a hen.
Yeah, really interesting. Don't know where that poem's going and then turning into that too.
I really love the marble shooting it off into its own planet. That is really a stunning image and moment.
And then extending it too. I love the mashers and stuff.
Yeah, I love the masher. It really makes me want to play marbles. I have no idea how to play it all, but it sounds fun.
It's fun. I haven't done that.
I want to do
fun,
that,
though.
but I want the biggies. No peewees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah. Laura Berg with this is the poem in which I turn upside down. Let's go next to Zachary Honeycutt.
Hey Tim, hey Katie. It's been a bit.
Yeah, it has been a bit. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you guys enjoying the show. So I did a Pantoum, surprise, surprise. This is the third one in a row that I've done
you're
on the
a
show.
Pantoum kick, that's for sure.
Yeah, nice.
And so I got the word reflect. And it made me think of reflecting a bit on my childhood. And so this one's going to be a little serious, but yeah, I think it's good. Pantoum in which I reflect. There were always two of me, now and then, going back and forth between other worlds. Mom's black and white kitchen, then Dad's den. To me, two lives would never end back then. Going back and forth with the same parents in different places, opposing homes. In me, two lives don't end ever, commence within one home and pretend it made sense. In different places that seemed warmly cold to my situation, like the camouflaged apathy of home strongholds purposefully remade to hide the cold of the situation. Mom's castle fort with a loud rug rolled over Dad's home, carefully laid to hide the cold stone court under which the dreams, like bones of consorts from Dad's old home and life, lie still and coarse. His tools were there, hanging still in my mind, and in the bones of the garage, of course. An unfinished treehouse, a life off course, divorce.
Yeah, great use of the form,
Yeah, it really
Zach, and
is.
that the ways the different courses and things like that play a lot of
Mhm.
play with the words there.
A lot of movement. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys. Nice
Yeah.
to see you all. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it definitely
too,
is. Thanks,
Zachary.
Zachary.
See you guys next week.
Yep. Zachary Honeycutt with Poem in Which I Reflect.
I can definitely relate to getting obsessed with one form and writing it many times. So
Mhm.
it's a great way to really get to explore it from different
Yeah,
angles.
to master that form.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Nancy Sabanek next.
Hey, hello.
Hey, Nancy.
Hi.
Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah, some really astonishingly great poems tonight. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, these are. I mean, it's just
I-
they're always wonderful. And then when there's
Yeah.
a good prompt too that sparks the imagination, that it's just like,
I love all the different directions tonight, especially. I think it inspires you
Same.
more different directions than normal.
yeah.
Said it. I got the word shift, and my poem's called Poem in Which I Shift after Denise Duhamel.
Mm.
By this I mean change, might shape at will. A lesson learned early on, for the very young are close to feral. Though a briar is sharp, all prick and tear, beneath burr and nettle, gorse and thorn, a rabbit shifts until no longer there. The first time I shifted, my small dog self climbed into the bed of my older brother, who was 4. Paws slung over and pressed against his slim, warm body, I slept until my father's anger sent me scampering from his tight-laced sense of shoulds. And then I understood. A girl is snow blown into whatever soots the air that carries her. She learns to shift into cornice, dune, snow bridge, cover and ripple for the cold, hard ground onto which she falls.
Yeah, another beautiful poem. Yeah, Poem in Which I Shift. Yeah, wonderful. So many directions, like you said. And yeah, that's another one. Thanks for sharing that,
Yeah.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is Nancy Sabanek with Poem in Which I Shift.
Mm.
Let's go to Mike Bales next.
Evening.
Hey, Mike.
I
Yeah,
saw-
good to see you.
I saw a friend of mine's watching, Sal Marici. He posted some comment about Kim. He said he took one of her workshops once online. He's a member of QC Poets that I'm a member of.
Oh yeah, yeah. Kim has a lot of students online, which is something we should have mentioned. Like she
Yeah,
does
she
that,
does.
and that's why we had that tribute to the students of Kim Addonizio once, because she has so. It was one of those things where I was noticing a lot of poems we published. People would say, "Oh, I was in, I learned this from Kim Addonizio, or I was in this class in this workshop." And it's, oh, let's put that together. So, yeah.
Sal was a botanist for the Corps of Engineers, and he started out, he was writing his reports in passive voice, and his supervisor saying write active voice, and somehow he drifted into poetry and had some books out. He's been retired a long time. Half the year he's up here in the Quad Cities, half the time he's in Florida. I don't know where he watched her workshop. The word I chose is persevere. Um, I'd have to say it has to do with the situation of life that I'm in now. Poem in which I persevere. When I say spring, I wonder what it means in January when the lawn outside lies bare. A deep sense of chill lingers, but the words remain like love last year. The voice of my late father says, wait it out. If the day is bad, the next will be better. I step downstairs in the kitchen and reheat last night's dinner while the sun breaks through a veil of clouds. The furnace breathes new life into a still room. I reach into memories of storms that my youth survived, and the poem I write bears seasons and years.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. That voice of your father coming in is a real standout. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it was Mike Bales with a poem in which I
persevere.
Let's go next to Amanda Harris.
Hey guys.
Hey Amanda, great to see you.
Hey.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, glad to be back. So this poem is called Poem in Which I Advance My Roses, after Denise Duhamel. Poem in which I advance the thorny side of a tilted rose that is angry because of how long it has gone without hydration. Deserts are known for these things, but not usually the cool and comfy slumber of a metro city. One without traffic, one without robbed men, one without total cars, one that loves water.
Oh yeah,
what
beautiful.
a turn!
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing that.
This poem just came to me very, very suddenly all at once, and I kind of love when it unfolds that way.
Yeah, definitely. You can feel the energy in that.
Such
as
a
you read
rush
it.
to have that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Amanda.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yep. There's Amanda Harris with a poem in which I advance my roses. Let's go to Chelsea McGlynn next. Hey, Chelsea, thanks for the patience.
Yeah.
No worries. So I got the word spare. So I wrote poem in which I'm spared. And I got an email just before we did this prompt that said, do not spare yourself. So that prompted me to make a cento of email subject lines. And I never delete my emails, so I had many, many years to work with. So I'm not sure how well it works, but I enjoyed writing it.
Oh, that's fun.
So,
Yeah.
Poem in which I'm spared. Welcome to the Milky Way. Now is the time for creators to build on their own land. Here are the tools I use: winter weather, wills and advanced directives, lower back pain. Delivery update. Your design is ready for the next step. Prepare purple martin nesting gourds. Remember to schedule your audition time. Withdrawal alert. Your account is unlinked. We're falling behind. Your balance is below $100. Urgent need for blood donors right now. What gives out when you fail? Your pregnancy, 36 weeks. Do not spare yourself. How quickly time resets an indefinite pause. Following up with your recent body modification. Did you read this message, Cam? Just so you know, I'm alive. I'm here. You are not alone.
Oh yeah, what a turn in that one too, from the humor to the serious, and then it's a cento form, and it's like a found poem. Makes it so profound too. I really like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the forms I've never actually written.
Yeah,
how did you have like a huge list? Like did you like flip through until you found the next one?
So
that fit?
I did a combo of both. So I scrolled through my email and pulled out every one that had an interesting line or a funny line or simple lines. You need a lot of simple lines for centos. And then I just played with it. At first I thought it was going to be about the election, and it turned out when I found the pregnancy email from 10 years ago, I was like, oh, now it's about pregnancy. And so when I found that, I started searching for words that were similar to that. So I just searched subject line blood, and I found like Red Cross emails. And when I searched for subject line birth, it said delivery failed, because all the emails are about like your account balance or like the delivery is late kind of thing. So it ended up being, there's a lot of email metaphors about births already sort of in there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, really interesting process.
Very interesting. And also thank you for justifying the fact that I have 50,000 unread emails. So I have a lot to work with in there. A lot of material.
That's why we're doing
Just saving it,
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chelsea. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, that was Chelsea McGlynn with a poem in which I'm spared.
Hmm.
And let's go to Frank Modica next. Or Modica.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Frank. Yeah, thanks for the
I
patience.
apologize for not following the prompt. I was a week late and a dollar short here, so I ended up going with the prompt from the previous week, if that's okay. And is it okay if I?
It's totally good for this week, but in general, it's our policy moving forward. That's just that. But you get a pass because you waited patiently. You have an awesome hat, and thank you.
Yeah, very cool. Good ruling, Katie.
Good ruling.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I ended up writing a baseball poem.
Oh, well, I love baseball poems, so I'm glad,
and a
doubly
summer
glad
poem.
for that
And
ruling.
It started as a poem with line breaks and stanza breaks, and I ended up writing it as a prose poem. And so this fast pitching. Before iPads, before PlayStations and YouTube videos, we played out our dreams in the schoolyard down the block. 2 boys, pitcher and batter, fielder and umpire. We were the Cubs and the White Sox, and the summer-long season pursued every day until the streetlights blinked on. Before each game, we picked up a dime ball from a box near the cash register at the corner store, carry our hand-me-down leather mitts and a banged-up wooden bat to the field. We stretched our own rules for singles, triples, and home runs from what older kids taught us, chalked a tall rectangular strike zone on the wall of the nearest school, marked off foul lines by fence posts, rubber smacked wood or the side of a brick wall. We mimicked the stances and swings of our favorite players as we chased after loose balls, ground balls, long fly balls, swung at impossible pitches, and argued balls and strikes inning after inning, game after game. Win or lose, we hoped the summer would never end. Always believed there'd be another year, another World Series. When we drive past our old schools and SUVs, smart media chattering away on our consoles, we still look for faded chalk marks on the walls. Sometimes we stop and turn off the car, try to conjure up our glory days. Maybe we could pitch one last curveball, track down a line drive, hit one out of the park in the bottom of the 9th inning, clinch the title over our crosstown rivals.
Yeah. Well, that one takes me back, and it's hitting close to home right now as my, all our softball leagues that we were in, the teams just keep disbanding.
Yeah.
And I might not do any more softball ever. So it's kind of, looking back at the glory days, as it were. Yeah.
Thank you. It's either called wall ball in some places. A buddy of mine said it was called deuce ball, but I always knew it as fast pitching.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that.
you.
That really did take me back. Thanks for sharing it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Frank Modica with fast pitching. And I believe that's going to wrap up the Zoom for tonight. Yeah, we got everybody. Let's go really quick to Ted Bernal Guevara's poem. And as always, Ted includes a photo. And here's an interesting one. This looks almost sitcom-ish.
I love Lucy-esque.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
It's a black and white photo of a woman winking as she does the dishes while the husband dries, I guess.
Yeah.
Good characterization. Okay. All right. And let's see what Ted did. Poem in which I delay endings. All right. Poem in which I delay endings. It's sweet to say that they were here, not a random way like Kilroy. No, recipes were left like oak leaves pressed in a poetry book. They were laughers of my jokes, and now they are dust gatherers like they were matter-of-factly, but a thrill filled in my adolescence. Harvey was more alive than her. Likely he read the poems in that book. She just slipped in the recipes long before iPhones for my niece to discover and try one at a holiday meal. Now Lucy is my henchman. She has the falling axe in these worrisome years. She doesn't mean to. Skipping checkups was a benign duty of a housekeeper. Harvey's don't forget, just hold water now. Lucy's gradually losing her weight wasn't abrupt enough. Harvey couldn't possibly see sexy in her malignant ass. But then again, maybe I think they were at the cusp of retirement anyway. I'm just not convinced of mine. Not yet. His poem In Which I Delay Endings by Ted. Pleasure as always, Ted. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I think that's going to wrap up the show for tonight. Let's go next to the Sciku. And the Sciku for this week is based on this article, which I think is one of those things that's I did a different one. Never mind. I couldn't decide which one to do something on. I ended up with this one, which is right here. Let me go. This is, do parents really have a favorite child? Here's what new research from BYU says.
Man, that's a tough study to do when you're a parent. Like kids are
really is, but it was one of those studies, and if we scroll down, where it's just obvious. I mean, parents tend to favor younger siblings, daughters, and the more agreeable, often without realizing it. Like if your kid's nicer and less of a pain in the ass, of course you're gonna like them more. And then, they tend to baby the babies in the family. Like, okay, well, that's great research.
Right. Okay.
And the older kids get more responsibility.
Then the middle children are obviously perfect. Oh, sorry.
Wait, what middle?
What middle child?
They're forgotten, I think.
No, we're not. We're the best.
They're the best. We all know they're the best.
I can say that because either one of our kids, we don't have middle children. So,
but Katie is a middle child. If you didn't pick that up. So anyway, that is and the study it was a survey of different literature on how we treat our kids differently, and they basically just found that there's those basic patterns that you would just expect, but they got, it was a study. So anyway, that is the article, and this is the haiku based on that, inspired by that. Sibling rivalry pulling apart the rose bushes. Sibling rivalry pulling apart the rose bushes. That was your Sciku. So you mentioned there was a freeze last week and had some rose bushes to kind of pull apart. So that memory came back, and
that's really interesting.
It happens. Yeah. Anyway, that is the Sciku for this week, and that is the show for this week. The prompt for next week is going to be, drum roll, please, right here.
Okay, here we go. So this is, I think, perhaps a little bit more challenging than we've done, but I know everybody's up for it. I want to say first, before I read it out loud too, that the month is about to end. So the In Which prompt was the last one to submit for this month, and then this will be the first for next month.
Yeah, great note that, so get these poems in. It's going to be tough competition with all the great In Which poems.
Yeah.
And then this prompt, because it's for February 2nd is the date. Is that right? February 2nd is the date.
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Okay. So then this will actually be for the month of February, because it's by the due date. You won't even be able to submit it, just to warn you again, until Katie finishes reading all the poems and replies, because Submittal won't let us update the field until then, or else it wipes out all the data, which is annoying.
A lot of problems. Yeah.
So you won't be able to submit it till like a little bit after, the end of the week, but this will be the February prompt. And the prompt is, Katie.
And the prompt is, write a poem that explores the perspective of the other side and arrives somewhere opposite to where the poem begins. So a lot of interpretation here, and some time to turn over it. And then, of course, we'll be sharing these poems next week on the prompt lines.
That's interesting. So the opposite perspective.
Don't influence people. We're talking about the other side. The other side, interpret it as you will, friends.
All right. Interpret it as you will. That's a fun prompt. We'll see what everybody does with it. A little bit of a challenge. A little esoteric.
Yeah, it is
getting
a little
on us
bit.
here, Katie. All right. That is next week's prompt. And next week's guest, I already mentioned, because she was here in the chat earlier, I saw. Next week's guest is going to be Hayden. Ooh, wait. Oh, I totally missed. Okay, hang on. Let me go here. As I was trying to fix that, I fixed the wrong thing. Oh, okay. Where did it go? I got to clear out this folder so I can find. There we go. There. Hayden Saunier, or Saunier, I got to ask her how to pronounce her name, is the guest next week. She's my Rattle Poetry Prize winner, just one of the wonderful poets that we've published frequently over the years. Her newest book is Wheel. I'm really looking forward to her. She's a great poet, and looking forward to talking poetry with Hayden. That is Rattlecast number 279. The prompt once again: write a poem that explores the perspective of the other side and arrives somewhere opposite to where the poem begins. So have fun with that. That's Rattlecast 279. Hayden Saunier, Sunday, February 2nd, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you in the meantime. Good night.
Good night.